Hi everyone! Welcome to Artsonia's After School Art Club. Today, we have a fun art project from Kimberly Medsker Mehalic, an art teacher from Maine. Hope you enjoy the video and don't forget to have your artwork uploaded to your Artsonia gallery.
Hi everybody, my name is Miss Kimberly Medsker Mehalic and I am a high school art teacher. And I'm going to show you today how to make a silkscreen just by using a stencil that's on Posterboard. I will walk and talk you through some mistakes that I make and then how I problem solve those issues. So for this project, you're obviously going to need some sort of fabric to print on. I used a blank t-shirt and then I made two tea towels, like dish towels as well. So I had two towels and then a t-shirt, and then I did make a stencil out of Posterboard. I used I used the negative space, this one, for my stencil, and then I saved these little fish for another project. And then you're going to need some sort of fabric silk screening ink. This is not paint, this is ink. And again, it's important that it's for silk screening and that it's fabric, otherwise it'll just wash away when you wash your towels or your t-shirt. Then you need a silk screen, and I silk screen pretty regularly. I make a lot of shirts and bags, and I use a photo emulsion silk screen typically, but Posterboard, the process I'm going to show you today, is much faster, and it's with materials that you'll have at your house, possibly with Posterboard. So silk screens can be reused. This one, you can see previous designs kind of stained onto it. You can actually see the fish from what I'm about to show you, but you can reuse silk screens, which is pretty awesome. Silk screens are literally just a layer of silk that is put inside of a frame. And then I usually use tape to make sure the silk screen is super secure inside the frame. But you don't need any kind of special material for the silk screen for this project, because quite literally what I'm going to show you is how to take a stencil and then put it behind your silk screen, and then to push ink through that onto your shirts. You're also going to see me use two different types of squeegees, and I start with using this. I thought this was going to be something that worked, but it come to find out my Posterboard was pretty thick, and so I had to use something smaller. So I used this tool just to push it even harder. So you could use like a school ID or a plastic card to help push your ink through the screen because of the thickness of the Posterboard. Now, if you use a thinner paper, you'll have a much easier time getting the ink through. And then I do use duct tape to attach the stencil to the silk screen. I use paintbrushes to clean up some of the ink, and then I use pieces of cardboard to stick in between the shirt and then also behind the tea towels. So silk screening is something that my students love to do, and this method is a little bit faster. So I hope you enjoy it. Thank you. All right, the first thing you need to do is set your fabric up. So you need to make sure it's relatively crease free, that you have pieces of cardboard to go underneath it or in between the layers. Otherwise, there's a good chance the ink will just seep through onto your table or onto whatever surface that you're printing on top of. And so I like to have everything set up like in a row so that I can move from one shirt over to the next. In this case, I'm going to be moving from the shirt over to the two towels. I don't want to have to touch the fabric, or I guess I want to limit touching the fabric as much as possible in case I get ink on my hands. Okay, so then after you get everything set up, you're ready to attach your stencil to the back side of your silk screen. And I obviously made the poster board bigger than the silk screen on purpose. You need to block all of the silk with the exception of what you want the ink to go through. So obviously I want the ink to print through the fish, so I don't want any other parts of the silk screen to show. So I'm just using duct tape to adhere the poster board onto the silk screen so I can keep it centered, and I'll be able to lift up the frame and go from one project to the next. Alright, so now you're ready to start printing. And again, you need to use fabric, silkscreen, ink. Make sure when you set your silkscreen down, again the poster board should be on the back so it's blocking out ink. Make sure that it's centered on your design. You should only need to pour a little bit of ink onto your silk screen, like you don't need a ton on it. I generally try to do it in one line. You can see this sure ends up not working out that well until I problem solve and fix it. So I use the larger squeegee to start, but as you can see, it didn't go all the way through. I wasn't pushing hard enough, or the poster board was just too thick. And so in order to kind of problem solve that, I needed to get a smaller kind of squeegee, and I also for this one tried the edge of the squeegee, and I spent more time kind of pushing the ink through. Generally when I silk screen you only have to go over the area twice with the squeegee, but because of the thickness of the poster board I had to push down a little bit harder. So as you can see, this one worked much better. Something also to note is when I move the silk screen from one project to the next, I make sure I center it so that it's not going to leave like an imprint wherever I leave it. I put it where I'm going to want to print it. So because the second silk screen, the tea towel, it had a little bit of splotches on it, I just used a small paintbrush to kind of touch up those areas where the ink didn't go through all the way. Another thing to note is that I am wearing an apron. Anytime you use fabric ink, I do encourage you to use an apron. Alright, so then for the third one, I use the big squeegee to apply the ink across the whole silk screen, but then I went back in with a much smaller, kind of harder piece of plastic and went over all the fish individually to see if this would work any better. And it definitely did. This worked a lot easier than using the edge of the squeegee. You'll see right when I lift it up, yay, that you can see all the fish. There are some areas that are lighter, but again, you just get a smaller paintbrush and you can fix those areas up. Another thing to note is anytime you get the ink on your fingers, it is really important to go and wash them and dry them well, because the ink can quickly ruin a silk screen project. Anytime you get it on your fingerprints, you'll end up getting little tiny smudges all over your project, and once it's there, it's really hard to get out. So you can see right here, I am just doing some final touch-ups with a little paintbrush, trying to keep my layers of ink super thin so that it matches kind of the texture and the consistency of the ink that went through the silk screen. And then once you're done with your projects, you need to go and have them dry. So what I do when I'm drying silk screens is I take them one by one and I drape them over. In this case I draped them over my bathtub. If they're t-shirts, usually I use a hanger and hang them up on the shower rod. Obviously don't have anything touch one another because then it will just get ruined. So at this point I realized that I needed to use the smaller squeegee, and I definitely wanted to fix that first shirt. And so I had to re-register. Basically that just means I lined up the stencil at the exact spot that I'd done it the first time. And then I just went over it using that smaller piece of plastic. So another thing to note is make sure you save any extra ink. It can be reused multiple times. So I just went back over and I pushed really hard on that piece of plastic on each of the individual fish so that it would cover up kind of all the fuzzy marks left the first time. And then when I lifted it, it was definitely much better. So again, a couple of reminders with Silkscreen is try to keep your fingers clean. Before I did any touch-ups, I always wash my hands off well. And then when you are ready for your projects to dry, go hang them up kind of one by one. It's important to rinse your Silkscreen pretty quickly. You don't want the ink to dry in it because obviously the purpose of fabric ink is to be permanent. So if your ink dries on your screen, usually you can't get it out. So once you're all done printing, make sure you rinse your screen really well. Again, I suggest wearing an apron for this project. I would use a sink that is easy to clean because this project tends to spray a lot. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it.